Welcome to the Blue Screen Brothers. Today I only have a cousin with me, so we have Niclas back. Hello, Niclas.
Hello, Olav.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you, and thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. So I was thinking about some of the main features in both Defender and Azure and Cloud App framework policies. We need to make sure that our needs for limitations or helpful hint to the user what they can do and what they cannot do, and even just reporting stuff. And then we have the Azure policies that we have been talking a little bit about before, but I think we should revisit it and maybe go into some different parts of the policy side.
Yes, you're completely right. So yeah, as you know, I work in security, so I sit a lot with the Azure governance and compliance, and yeah, Azure policies are your go-to tool here, I would say. Obviously, you have network and identities, but the policies are really your technical controls where you can limit people in another way. So I think we should maybe start off with what is an Azure policy, at least just a brief fly-in. And basically, you can use Azure policies to enforce organizational standards and use it for compliant at scale. I don't know if you have talked about this before, but nevertheless, I think we should show some examples of that.
Yeah.
It is usually I say that policies, Azure policies, they are sort of a business rule, you could say, within your company. So before you start, either using one of the built-in policies or you use to create your own custom policy, it is important to understand what is your intent of the policy, what is the actual goal with it. Can see it as sort of a business requirement, right? Business rule. So you need to define like what is the state of the expected state of the resource that you want, and what do you want to do with that resource or with that policy once it is compliant or non-compliant.
And I also think that the most basic thing is to figure out, do you want to prevent something from happening, or do you want to report if something happens that you would like to know about?
Yes, definitely. It is super important. And again, it is back to understanding the use case for your policy. Is it a policy, do you want to just audit things, see if things are okay? Do you want to prevent people from doing something, with a deny effect? Do you want to, modify stuff? Do you want to deploy new things? There are various options. So
we can give some easy examples. For instance, you don't want to run expensive VMs in one of your subscriptions. Then you can create a policy that denies everything of creation of a certain machine type, except a certain machine type. So that's a basic that a lot of people should enforce, because in my company, I suddenly discovered that somebody had a high performance, high GPU running machine, been running for a couple of years, not being used for anything, but it was quite expensive.
Yeah, it is. Let's see. I actually don't. Do we know the name of it? I mean, we can obviously look it up here. Maybe it's
some skus.
Let's see here. Allowed virtual machine size skus, probably this one, I believe. Yeah. So here you have it, right? So this is basically your properties here. So yeah, without going too much into it, then you can see we have one parameter here, and it is the list of allowed skus. Here we have a Strongtype, which is, how can we explain that? It is limited to I don't know how to explain that in English. It's sort of it will show a supported like value of this specific. Here we have it, the specific machine. So in this case, if we try to show it,
that's the part that will show us the available skus, right? So it's exactly a defined list collected from Microsoft.
Exactly. So here you have it, right? As we could see here, here you can basically select every single SKU that is available for VMs. And if we go back here, we can see we actually have not listed anything in our parameter, right? We don't have any allowed values. So this is what the Strongtype does. It basically goes in and
it actually creates a visual filter instead of you going in to define every machine type yourself. You can actually see the visual filter.
Yeah, you can see.
And this is actually the core of a policy. This is the definition itself. That's the main core.
It is, and just going to show here with a simple PowerShell command how you can also see this strong types.
You need to remember that we don't have a PowerShell only. Share the window.
Share the window. Fine. We can take it afterwards with the command, but it's easy to find out how you can use the Strongtype. So with a simple PowerShell command. It's how can you again explain it? It's sort of the metadata property that you can use. We will share the link afterwards. I think that's probably the easiest. I have not configured my Cloud Shell to show it. But nevertheless, this is really how it looks like, the policy property or the definition here. You have your properties. Here you can see the policy rule. I think one important thing here with the policy rule is that, and I believe this actually confuses a lot of people. It is that the policy rule only proceeds if the condition is true, right? This is an if-then statement. So you have the if here and you have the then here. So if this is true, which means that the type we are looking at, it's a virtual machine, equals a virtual machine, and it is not one of the allowed SKUs that we have here, then it will deny it. Right. So this is something I often see people they are confused with, that they believe like, okay, why is it not proceeding? It should be false, but actually it is the opposite. The policy rule proceed if it is true.
And this definition will be something that you will find all over Azure. Is this a global definition, or will definition be?
Yes, good question. So all the built-in, you can see here, it's a built-in type policy, which means it is governed and handled by Microsoft. We can see the versions here. It's a major minor patch. So it's a version 1, patch 1 version. And up here, we have the definition ID. It just shows you the ID here is the last part. And the rest is really just the resource provider. If you would have, which means this is globally available within your tenant. You don't necessarily have it limited to one subscription or another. However, I'm just going to take the first one here. It's a different policy, but it's just to show it. This is a custom policy, and you can see this is only available within this subscription. So this is limited to my subscription called Microsoft Partner Network. I cannot use it in my, Accenture test subscription.
So the definition are, if they are built in, will be globally available for all your management groups and all your subscription. But if you create your custom, you have to decide if it's going to be located at a subscription level or at a management group level.
Yes, that's correct. And you can see here, just to emphasize that, once you want to create a new policy definition, then you have to actually select where do you want to place this. In my case, I only have subscriptions. Other cases, you would have management groups as well that you can put it in. It could be your intermediate root group. It could also be, less, could be your platform management group if you're using the Azure Landing Zone architecture.
In my own setup, I have the landing zone management group, and then I have my old legacy management group. So I can have a little bit different because I have a tighter setup at the landing zone than I have on the old legacy. So it's nice to can have the different settings instead of making exceptions all the time. So or replicate one policy to the different subscription. It's better to set it at the highest but lowest place. So as high as you need it, but as close as possible to the resources it's going to protect.
Definitely. What else can we show here? I mean, you can see this is just the default one that Microsoft shows, right?
Yeah.
Always needs a name. You don't need to give it a description. You don't need to give it a category. It is nice though to use the built-in categories, especially when you use the regulatory compliance. So it gives you a better overview once you're in the dashboard. But then really here it's once you get a hold of it, the most important in general is your policy rule. That is the bread and butter for the policy.
Yeah, but then we have the definition. We have a location of the definition. But if we are going to use it somewhere, then we have to go to the next step.
Yes, we do. So if we just continue with this, and you can see I will have to give it a name, and it could be I don't know, allow location, for example. The existence is a little off, but that's fine. We'll continue like this.
So you can actually use the Strongtype yourself if there are Strongtypes already defined for what you are going to look up from Azure. Yeah,
that's correct. So again, the Strongtype it can support like a resource type or an allowed value. It's pretty good because as you can see here, locations now. Then we're like allowed location. What can that be? Can I just write I don't know, West Europe, or should I write Denmark or Sweden or Norway? How does that work? And actually now, because we have said that it's a Strongtype, it gives us it limits the options for us, right? It already shows these are the options that you can select. You cannot select anything else.
And it will be updated every time there is a new center available.
Yes.
It will be updated. No.
Exactly. This is managed by Microsoft, so it is a really strong way to limit the options for.
And that's particularly nice when you're talking about the VMs again, because the VMs are always adding. The only thing I don't like with the VMs is that you cannot say an entire family and all the new version of that family. So you need to select version 2, version 3, version 5, and so on when new versions arrive. But it's easier to update it this way. So
definitely. And again here, if you had it on a management group scope, could be on your landing zone, then you could either assign it to your landing zone. To your management group scope, which would then inherit it all the way for all your subscriptions within that management group, or in my case, this will just be available on a subscription. But actually, you also have the opportunity to choose that it should only be available or only be applied to my resource group under this. So you can really be very granular with the assignments.
Yeah, because there will be some policies that might be too harsh for some of your environments, but should be applied on some parts of the environment. So it could be smart to figure out where you're going to use it. So.
Yes, indeed. And it could also be that you might have a policy, could be like this, allowed locations, and you want to put it on your intermediate root group management group, which is the highest level, which then it will be inherited throughout your whole tenant. But you might have a sandbox environment, let's say, and in that you might want to allow for some reason US, for example. Let's say now I have selected, right, you can only do these three here, North Europe and so forth, but for whatever reason you want to allow all other locations in your sandbox, and then you can use the exclusions here. So in here again, if you had it, then you could select your sandbox management group, for example, and you can exclude that from this policy. So that is also very powerful.
But how would it be if we create this policy first for the subscription, and then we create another policy with the same definition, but it allows more sites and add it to a resource group?
If it's assigned to the same scope, then the policy that is stricter, so to speak, will kick in. Yeah. So yeah, in this case, if we just remove this one here, I can clear my selection, do this. So if I assign this just to my subscription here, Microsoft Partner Network, and I created like a duplicate of this with, let's say, the other one, I only allow North Europe, for example, then it will be the one having the most, what to say, restrictions that will kick in place, right? Yeah. So, but again, it's not really recommended to have multiple policies doing the same thing. So
no, it was just to say that exclusions are more important than you actually think, because you might want to do exclusion and you think you can add another policy with easier rule set, but it will be the hardest rule set that will overwrite everything.
Yeah, for sure. That is definitely very important. What else do we have? We have the policy enforcement. So this is actually quite critical, I would say, if you are playing around with custom policies or policies that you are not entirely sure what does. Then you're testing out new policies, for example, then you should definitely go and disable policy enforcement. You can read here what it does, but really, if you had like a deny effect policy, as we have here, then it means that it will not deny anything. It will basically just be an audit policy. Yeah. Until you have seen that it is doing what it is supposed to do. Again, back to your business rules, it is confirming your use case. Once you have that confirmed, you can then enable it here again, and then move on with it.
And that's also important to be aware of, that if you are creating a new policy, it will not delete or block anything else. It will just report if you have gone against the rule set. So if we have already created something in West USA, for instance, it will still be there and it will still work, but you will not be able to create something new there if we have created this policy that we are setting up now.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, and that goes for pretty much everything, right? For all the effects that resources that are deployed prior to assigning a policy will usually not be affected. So yeah, that's definitely a key thing to remember.
Yeah, but they will appear as non-compliant.
They will appear as non-compliant. Very correct. But you, for example, let's see, do we have anything interesting here? Yeah, I have a lot of assignments. Question is, we have anything interesting there in the compliance? Because let's just take this one, for example, just with the resource log. So in here we can see we have one non-compliant one, and if I had applied this a policy, a new policy assignment, then this will still be non-compliant. It's not like it will remediate anything. So there you actually need to go and start working with your remediation task, which is also something if you do if you, for example, work with your diagnostic settings. I think this is something that a lot of people are struggling with. We can take one example here, diagnostic, and it doesn't really matter which one it is. Let's find something we have. So maybe this automation. Yeah, we just take it for the sake of it. Then you can see I already have one. So in here, we have a managed identity, right? Yeah. And the managed identity is something that you need to use for effect mode, that is modify or deploy if not exist. So those two effects are something that will change something in your environment, right? The modify one usually is used for changing tags on a subscription or resource for that matter. And the deploy if not exist is very, as you can see here, it's primarily, I would say, the primary use case I have seen is to deploy diagnostic settings, but it can be used for other things as well. Just remember, it should never be used for deploying resources. It should only be used for deploying configuration. So it's a very important thing to bear in mind, because I have seen people who are trying to deploy new things using the deploy if not exist policy. And that is, a no-go.
So it's quite powerful because we can deny something to be created. We can check if something goes against our rules, and in the next level we can also create remediations that actually can modify something to meet up the standards we are setting.
Definitely. So if we just take a look at this again, this is a custom policy that I've created here. It's assigned to my scope here, which you can see it's equivalent to the Microsoft Partner Network. We go through it here. Another thing is the mode. I have also, maybe we should just cover that briefly, but the mode here, it can be important with because indexed means that it is only used at a few things. You also have something called mode all, which will then hit all resource that you have within the scope that you have assigned it for, right? Whereas the indexed one is something that is only evaluating resource types that are support tags and locations. So that's certainly you can have like, in this case, event hubs, they support tags and locations. So that's why we have indexed, but you could go further down, the resource type tree where you have slash something, which you don't really normally see, but that would then not be evaluated if you use indexed, but you would need to use all in your mode.
Okay, so this will actually say if that if you have created a policy in old days, then you will say that all new need to have all new resources need to have these two tags, and suddenly there will be some resources that doesn't support tags. But if you are using indexed, it will actually not be applied to those. But if you have used all, it will be applied to those that actually doesn't support tags, for instance.
Yeah, so in general, Microsoft recommends you that you use the mode all in almost all cases, right? Because then you are safe. But there are cases where you might want to leave out some of the resource types or the configurations that you put on a resource type, because they will have these slash after. It could be I don't know, network / route table / routes, for example. So that, for example, cannot be tagged. It's a configuration, right? So if you use the indexed mode, it will not be affected. So it will simply just be ignored. And you don't want that, right? So that's why you want to use all there. So in general, use all for most cases, in case you have like a specific use case where you want to use indexed, and that could,
interesting.
What else do we have here? Then we have again, we have one of our parameters here. It is the effect. In this case, effect here is really just you can write whatever you want here. I have just called it effect. We can see we have some metadata here, which is a display name. So that is when you start to assign it. I will show it. Then you have both display name and the description. You have the allowed values. So again, that will be the effect values. In this case, we have deploy if not exist, order if it not exist, and disabled, right? And our default value, meaning if we just took and assigned this policy straight away, this will be the value that we will be picking. The same goes for our profile name. It is another parameter. It's just used here and so forth. And once again, we have the Strongtype. We also have a Strongtype here for our event hub namespace and so forth. This is sort of a little complicated, you could say, custom policy, but just to show what is actually possible. Once again, we have our policy rule. Remember, this is our if-then statement. So we are looking at if the type is an automation account and any of, this is the important thing, right? And any of these two are true, then we proceed. So if our location, event hub location is empty, is equals empty, right? Or if our location is equal one of our locations that we have specified further up here in our Sweden Central or West Europe, then we will proceed, and we have an all of clause up here. So this says that all of these should be, evaluating to true before we go forward. But this one says that one of these two should only be true. Okay. And then we will move forward to our effect. And remember, our effect here, we have parameterized this. We could have hard-coded it. We saw that previously, that here you can write something instead. But again, I always recommend to use parameters. You can sort of see them as fields in a form. So imagine you have a form where you have, it could be city and street and so forth. If I open a page with a form, I can fill in whatever values I want in those boxes, right? And if you open it, you would have something else. You will be in Norway. I'll be in Denmark. And this is sort of the same thing as you can see here with parameters, right? It's really customizable, so it's very good. Then we have something else called existence condition, and this is also something, I spoke about policy rules confusing people a little bit because it only evaluates if the condition is true. The existing condition is actually the opposite of the policy rules. So that only proceeds if the condition is false. So that is, and this is where we are then here. Now it becomes maybe a little bit too difficult, but once again, we have all of, so it means that all of these, as we can see here, all of this, sorry about that, should be false. Not true, false, before we continue, right? So here we are looking at, do we have any diagnostic logs? Which one would be enabled? In this case, it should be equal the audit, and so forth. So once we have completed this check, we would then move on to something called role IDs. And the reason why you want to have this hard-coded here, so these IDs here, they are equal to a built-in Azure RBAC role. And this is because once you start assigning it, you don't have to scroll through every single RBAC role that is there. You can sort of look at it as the Strongtype, right? We have hard coded now that.
So this will be the remediations managed service.
Yes. So these two roles here that we have provided, they will be assigned to the managed identity. If I, of course, have
that's this role they need to fix. We are now trying to fix the missing. If I interpret it right, if you haven't set up logging on the event hubs, you will set up logging, and then you need these permissions to set up the logging, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
And again, you should always aim for this to be least privilege, right? So you don't want to put the owner here. You might want to put, even contributor will be, overprivileged. But in some cases, that is what you want to put there, right? Then we actually come down to our deployment template, and some people might be familiar with this from if they have worked with ARM templates before. It's the same thing. So our deployment here is actually an ARM template that you can see. So we do have some parameters here, and it's important not to confuse it with the parameters that we have here in the top, right? It is two different things. So the parameters here in the top is something we are using for our policy rule, and for our existing condition. And the deployment down here is actually something that we use for our deployment template. In this case, we are deploying on the automation account, the diagnostic settings. We're using this API version. Again, you have a profile name, location. You can do some dependencies. So you can say like, okay, we want we only want to deploy this resource if something is, if it's dependent on something. So it means that you need to have another resource. It could be like maybe a resource needs to exist before we actually deploy this. Yeah, again, we come down to our properties here. This is where you will then start to sort of, in this case, click the metrics. So once again, I will show you once we assign it, and then the logs. Which logs categories do we want? In this case, we want audit and we want all. Yeah, output. The output is if you are a little nerdy and you want to look into the the templates and the outputs in your logs, then this is a great way to do it. So you will actually, instead of just having like an empty output, you will actually get something that you can say. So in this case, it will tell you that, okay, this profile name has been created, blah, 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 for this event hub. So I think this is good practice as well to have it, but not a lot of people use it. But it's very good for troubleshooting as well. And down here, you actually have the parameters that are related to the parameters that we saw up here in the deployment, right? So these. But yeah, let's just try to assign it for a second, just to see. Again, we have the scope. We are aware of that from also the building one. Everything here is the same. Again, if you're testing a custom policy, I recommend you to put disable here so you don't mess up anything to begin with. Then you will see how it behaves. Advanced, we'll skip it for now. It's not really something that I am using too much, and I don't think I've seen it being used.
It's also in preview, so yeah.
Yeah, it's always also in preview. True. Then here, this is where it's interesting, right? If you remember all of the parameters that we had in our policy definition file, then you can see we have the effect here. And remember, we did have a description like the metadata, and this is what we're seeing here. Here we can then select between. Remember, we had a default value was deploy if not exist, but we can also say it should be disabled, or we should say it's audit if not exist. Just keeping the disable here. We will give it a profile name. This can be whatever, but again, it's the default value. In here, I actually don't think I have an event hub right now, but if I had, again, you will be able to. Let's see if we can find one. No, unfortunately not. Also a bad example, but. We have seen it with the Strongtype we actually have the Strongtype here.
Yeah, so
right?
You can actually scope it down a bit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the same event hub name, it's a free text field. Here, metrics, true, false, it's something that we put as well. But what is important here and what we actually want to conclude is deploy if not exist policies, they need to have a managed identity for it to work. So you can, of course, say, I don't want to have this, a managed identity. But as it also says here, the deploy if not exist and the modify effect, they need to have this to work. So you can do this, but then it will not do anything. It will just be an audit policy, right? Yeah. So that kind of defeats the purpose. So you want to have a managed identity. You can then choose between having a system assigned managed identity. You can again choose here. We can just say it should be in West Europe. Or you can have a user assigned managed identity. And without deep diving too much into managed identities, then I would say for policies, always, and I mean always, use system assigned managed identities, because it lives with your policy, which means the whole
I think
life
I would
cycle.
say that the only exception to that rule is if you are trying to reconfigure something once by using policies because you're going through a lot of different setups. It could be okay enough to use the user assigned managed identities because it could be easier. but I would also always use manage identity and rather not
Yes.
use the exceptions.
You are correct. There will of course always be exceptions to the rule where you can use user-assigned managed identity. But just remember that if you use this and you later delete your policy assignment here, then you do not delete the managed identity. So suddenly you have like an orphan managed identity, and again that can potentially be dangerous, right? Because we will be assigning it, and this is back to the roles that we saw, right? The hard-coded values that we saw. Log Analytics contributor and Azure Event Hub's data owner. So having an orphan managed identity with these permissions is probably not something you would like. Because it's
even worse, it could be the
right?
owner of the subscription, right?
Exactly. And something a lot of people forget, I would say, when you have deployed notices policies are to again, if you know what you're doing, but is to create the remediation task straight away. I recommend this as well if you know again what you're doing and you do not have, if you have this enabled, because then you don't have to wait for it to evaluate, which can take some time. And then once it have evaluated, you need to go to the remediation and you need to start the remediation task. In this way, you just run everything smoothly and in one flow. And for me, that is a bit easier because then I know it is being done. But of course, if you just want to see how your policy is behaving, then you should not do this. Then you should just click it off and wait and see how it behaves. Non-compliant messages, very powerful tool when you are using deny policies. For the rest, doesn't really matter. But if you have a deny policy, then sometimes you get just a weird message up here, right? You're not allowed to do this. And you're like, okay, what is blocking me?
I see that now in most built-in, you actually get better non-compliant messages than you used to. But when you are using custom and you don't get any feedback at all, so you should actually use non-compliant messages to say at least what type of component you are trying to fix, and this might be the problem or something like that.
Exactly. You could just write, please contact CCUE at, I don't know, whatever.
Something to help the people
because
with
then when people are denied trying to do something, the little error message you get up here in the corner, it would actually give you a good guidance and a hint to, okay, what should I actually do? Why am I blocked? And then here we just have the overview, the classic overview. Not gonna assign it, but very powerful stuff that you have here.
But that leads me to another question, because I know that you typed in all these 300 and something lines just from your head, right?
Yes.
So just figure out, we are going to talk later about some places you can go to get custom community created definitions. But if we are going to create our totally own private personal policy, could you just show us how we can create definitions?
Yes, definitely. So you, again, first of all, let's just have a storage account as an example here. I have my blob storage account. Once again, back to, you need to understand what is it you want to do. Let's say in this case, I want to have a policy that will deny the use of anonymous blob access. Right now it is disabled, so it's actually, I have configured it correctly. This is the key here. You want to configure things correctly. I want to put this in version 2.1. I want to do, things that are correct. Once I have done this, I can easily go down here onto automation. I have something called export template. And the smart thing is that instead of you guessing and having, because you remember the policies, you actually need to provide the properties that you want to protect. And you might not necessarily know that if you're new to Azure, for example. So once you use this, and it's just generating now, you actually get all the different properties that you have on a storage account, and in this case, my storage account. So you can see here, this was the one I changed. I changed the allowed copy scope, and I changed the TLS version. and we have the allow blob public access. I put it to false, right? So this is a very powerful way for you to understand what properties do you have available without you having to sit and guess. Also, because sometimes you might want to guess, should this be, should this be a dot? Should it be 1.2? Should it be an underscore? You don't know, right? Obviously, you can find out in different ways, but this is just a very convenient way for you to actually do ClickUps and then just export the template, and you have exactly what you want.
Cool.
So this is it's good stuff because then you can use these properties in your custom policy.
Yeah, because it take quite some time if you are doing something wrong with your naming, or like I say, dot instead of underline and so stuff like that, and it will take some time before you get the message that something is wrong. If you get the message at all, you just get result you didn't expect to get. So this is a nice way to get the right format of the file, so the JSON file you're going to use.
Yeah, it is a very very good way to do it. Now, of course, other ways you can do it. You can also use the policy extension for visual code if you like to do that. Sometimes I use the ARM template website. Let's see if I can find the what's it called? Let's call ARM template. See, well, maybe we have it here. Actually, so this one here, you can say. Now we were looking for storage account, right? So we need to find storage. Go all the way down to S. You can find it. Storage. Here we go. Yeah. Here we go, right? And in here, you actually have the storage account. So this is pretty much what we saw. You can see it's not entirely the same, but because this is just the generic one. But it, again, it gives you the properties that you want to use, and it gives you what type it is. So once again, we had this one, right? The allow copy scope. We know it's a string. We can look it up then. And down here, we actually get the values of what we can put in.
So we had the AAD,
Exactly. And that's what we could see here, right? We had the AAD here. And again, for the minimum version, you could have gone in here and then see, okay, we can use this. We need to use underscore instead of dot. So this is also a very good way to confirm what you're doing. So many ways to roam always.
Yeah.
That's how it is in Azure.
That's cool. So I think we have done enough for today, but we now know that it's a definition that get assigned, and you can put it on management group or subscriptions.
That's
where it starts.
That's where it starts.
And then we have the exemption, because we cannot have conflicting policies, because if you have conflicting policies, it will always be the strongest that will be applied. So
it will. So there are many exceptions to this, and then obviously we have something called exemptions as well. If you want to, you see, I have played a little bit around here, but if you want to exempt a policy from a scope, you can also do that. So you can say, I want to have my subscription X. Should be allowed to be in these countries. We had this policy before. Then you can exempt it. But that is something we can save for another time. There are many options and possibilities in using Azure Policy. Is really almost just the imagination that will put the boundaries for what you can
and
achieve.
You need actually to get to know it. If you are an Azure admin, you need to know policies. Even though if you're a small user, you really want to limit what types of VMs, what locations, what size of databases, and so on. Something as simple as location, when we have countries that you are allowed to create resources in. So it need to be hard coded that you cannot create them in those countries, because it's so easy to make the mistakes.
It is very easy, and this is the way, as you said, for example, also with FinOps or cost management, this is your way to go. So it's not only for security purposes, it is also used for a variety of other use cases again.
And the great thing is that you can apply them with not enforcing, so you can actually monitor and see if the result you get is what you expect. So you can start to monitor stuff before you turn it on. So start with getting insight and understanding before you enable them.
Exactly. Enforcement mode disabled.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks for showing up, Niclas.
Yeah, no problem. Always happy to help. And again, just reach out for the listeners if they have any questions.
I'm pretty sure we're going to talk more about the policies soon. So see you around.
Yeah. Thank you.